Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It's about 10:39. So yeah, this is a show that I've been wanting to do for quite a long time, and a movie that I really love so much. I think it's one of the best sequels in movie history and horror, and particularly and definitely, I think it's one of the best sequels in the world of horror. And that is this bad boy here, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. I just think that this movie totally rocks. This movie is funny too because it's a pretty polarizing movie. It was directed by Tobe Hooper, who was responsible for the iconic classic, uh, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, which came out in 1974. This movie is really polarizing in a lot of ways. I know lots of people who really love it, and I've heard lots of people talk about it throughout the years that really love it and love how the biggest aspect that they love about it, and also for me, my biggest reason why I love it so much is just how so incredibly different it is. Toby Hooper really wanted to kind of stretch the boundaries and messed, wanted to, I feel like, intentionally mess with the expectations of the audience, but give them something new and put that whole universe that he created with Texas, put it in a much different in a much different kind of reality or setting. And so but there's also, it's so different. That's the thing that I love about it is, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't in sequels or franchises. But I think that Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part Two is such a great example of how it really works. The best, for my money, I think it's the best how it works, particularly in the horror world, in like the horror exploitation world. And on the other side of things, there's a lot of people who hate this movie and think it's like just a piece of trash, not even a good piece of trash, but literally a piece of trash where they will not even give it any credibility and just totally dismiss it as just a complete and utter disaster of a movie and a total kind of shit stain on Toby Hooper's career. And so what I've noticed over the years that you have these two extremes. There's never anybody in the middle that seems to maybe take a stance of where they can understand those two kind of views, or maybe they're in the middle of the road and they like some things about it, or they don't like some things about it. It's I've always seen that there's with this film is like, now it's a regular thing in horror movies where there's like extreme polarization, and a lot of that's due because of kind of the bullshit around social media. But uh, and it's a lot of that is kind of manufactured. It's not really real, I think. But this movie came out obviously way before the internet and all those things, and before people had platforms to kind of vent their opinions. But this film was definitely the first example where I saw a film that was really controversial in a lot of ways, and it had people on both sides of the fence, totally extreme, difference of opinions that had these views that were a world apart, and really interesting. But I've always loved this film. I always loved how it was such a contrast to the original, because Texas, the original, is easily one of my all-time favorite shows. I did a big show on the. I did two separate shows on Texas, where I did a big show on the original, which is one of my all-time favorite movies of all time. One of my personally one of my biggest inspirations as far as, well, I guess when it pertains to my band Quantum, one of the biggest inspirations. So many things taken from that, from the music to the aesthetic. With how I create the music for that band, and the use of masks and kind of trying to create a theatrical vibe. Texas is definitely the biggest influence on it, the original. So that movie has such a deep resonation with me. But the thing that I love so much, but the thing that's really intense about that movie is that it feels like a documentary. It doesn't. Every time I watch that film, it never really feels like I'm watching a movie. It feels like I'm watching a documentary because it's so gritty and down and dirty and rough and just like in your face, and just psychologically it's so horrific, but it's such a trip. But the other thing is that movie overall is a very serious movie. It's made to be taken literally. It's a real intense, journey that you're on from the beginning to the end. But it's very serious. It's a very serious movie. And what I loved about the tonality of the second one is that it's really not a serious movie at all. I feel like Tobe Hooper wanted to do something so different, and kind of to a degree, almost make a parody of it, to an extent, of the first one, where he wanted to have such a contrast, where almost to the point of making fun of the first one, and not taking himself as seriously as a filmmaker, but then not the actual world that he created with Texas, trying to like almost make fun of it, but put it in this whole different thing where it's not meant to be taken seriously, and it's like really silly and goofy at times. But yet, I think it also has a very serious nature. I feel, particularly around Leatherface. I think Leatherface, to a degree, is uh, almost a little bit more deranged in the second one, because I feel like it goes a little bit more into the androgynous nature of his character. But yet, again, it's very silly and it's very 80s, and it's got this real schlocky campy vibe to it, and but yet at the same time, it's completely bonkers and totally crazy. I love it. I just love it. And it came out in 1986, so it came out, you know, about 11 years after the original. The cast is amazing. This was the introduction to Bill Moseley, one of the greatest actors in horror, one of the greatest character actors. Uh, he was in, I mean, he's most famous for his work with Rob Zombie. Just so great. Just so great. Bill Johnson plays this rendition of Leatherface. Originally it was Gunnar Hansen, but I think he is such a great actor, and his portrayal of Leatherface is so awesome in this movie. I just love it. I love it to death. He's super silly, campy, but yet he's still murderous and terrifying. And I think it goes a little bit more into the whole kind of androgynous, kind of aspects of his character and like his presentation. And of course, the biggest thing of this movie is it has Dennis Hopper in it. One of the greatest American actors ever. And to see him on the big screen, in this like really schlocky sequel to an iconic movie, is so awesome. And he's completely insane. Dennis Hopper at one point was regarded as like, you know, right up there with James Dean, and Marlon Brando, like one of the greatest American actors, if not the greatest American actor of his generation. And to see somebody of his caliber in a movie that is really schlocky and kind of silly, I just think is so awesome. And that he took, you know, such a creative risk in his career, and, in his, for that matter, his like reputation as being like a serious actor, and doing something so silly and ridiculous. I just think was such a great call, by Tobe Hooper to cast him in this film. It also stars Jim Siedow, who is fantastic in it. Caroline Williams. Caroline Williams is just awesome in this movie. Ken Everett plays Grandpa. again, one of the greatest portrayals of that iconic character. Um, it's such a fun movie, and I love that it has more of an amusement park kind of ride to it. It's more. I feel like it's more colorful. It's got a lot more of a colorful, almost cartoon like quality to it, but yet it's still got that core essence, with the family in Texas, where it's still completely and utterly deranged and totally sick and depraved, but yet at the same time you're laughing at it and you're just having this like great grand old time watching it. And it's not meant to be, as a whole, seriously, to be taken too seriously. It's a really wonderful contrast from the first one, and it's a world apart. And that's what I think. I think at the end of the day, that whole contrast of the whole vibe of the movie really makes it so terrific, and why it's just a great ride. Last year I watched both of these movies together, and it was great. I mean, it was so I enjoyed them even more. I enjoyed both films even more, but then watching them together was so great because again, the contrast is just so awesome and so elevated. In the humor. And I never understood people. I understand people don't want change, or they sometimes, especially for a franchise or a movie that's so iconic, they there's a part of the audience that kind of wants a level of where things are kind of familiar to them because you have these things that are established in the first film that leaves such an impression with people. So they kind of want to have a level of familiarity around it, or they want to have the same kind of tone, or that same kind of world. But this movie really is so different in every way, shape and form, and I think it's such an extreme jump as far as one movie to the next. But I think that this is an example of that really, really working because of the contrast, and because he just went gonzo crazy, and Tobe Hooper went gonzo crazy in a totally different direction. And so, yeah, it's easily my favorite sequel in the franchise by far. Not a huge fan of the other movies. I do really love the remake, which I will be doing a show on at some point. I didn't really like the remake when I first saw it, and it came out about 8 years ago, I think. Now, wasn't a huge fan of the remake, but I've bought it since then, and I've watched it quite a few times, and I actually really love that movie. And I'm going to be doing a show about that at some point. And again, it's one of those things where it pays homage to the original movies, and it has those kinds of tropes, but it's really a fresh take. It's really fresh, and it's like feels like you're seeing these characters for the first time. It's a really awesome movie. Those three are my favorite in the entire franchise. I'm not a big fan of the other movies at all, but I just think that these are really great. Those are really awesome movies, and this was a show and a movie I've been wanting to cover for a long time, and I just hadn't really gotten to it, or you know because of various reasons. But just such an awesome movie, and I understand both views. I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum because I'm a huge fan, but I understand people who really really love it. I'm totally into that, and I'm totally one of those people. But I understand people not liking it, or even really hating it. Uh, but I kind of feel like they don't get it. I feel like people, it's fine. People can have their polarizing opinions, but I just feel like they just don't get what the mechanism was behind Tobe Hooper's thinking with the movie. They just don't, they don't get that he wanted to do something really adventurous and different, and show a huge contrast to the first one, and give you something new and fresh, with a certain level of it being familiar. But just such an awesome movie. And I think for horror films, it's probably my favorite horror sequel. When it comes to like the horror low budget exploitation world, I think it's my favorite sequel in all of horror. I think it's one of the most. I think it's the most successful example of a really great sequel to an already super established iconic movie. Just so awesome. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again for checking out this channel. And if you like this page, please like and subscribe and leave some comments. I love interacting with other fellow film fanatics. So thanks a lot for everything, and have a great day. Peace.